Welcome to Amplifying Recruitment. In this episode, I'm joined by Amy Williams. Amy is a trainer, a coach, a consultant, a facilitator, an all-round leadership expert. In this episode, Amy shares some of her insights from the dozens of companies that she'd worked with to enhance their leadership capabilities. We look at the early stages of identifying future leaders in your business. We look at how you can better perform as a billing manager or team leader, and what you can do as a business owner to support the leaders in your business. Amy, hello.
Welcome. Nice to finally spend time with you.
Likewise. For anyone that doesn't know you, could you do like a bit of an intro?
Yeah, sure. So I am all things. I'm a coach, I'm a consultant, I'm a facilitator within the recruitment industry, specializing in leadership skills and behaviors. I've been in the industry now for about 11 years, which feels like a lot, but I know you've had some people on here that are industry veterans, and that's probably not a lot to them. And for the majority of that time, I grew and led the performance development function of a business that grew from 40 to 240 in the UK, the US, and Germany. And my expertise is behavior change. So a lot of the work that I do is psychology and neuroscience informed. So I'm really focused on driving proper skill development, proper habit change, as opposed to a lot of traditional methods of learning and development, which are more around sort of content consumption. So yeah, I launched my business about 18 months ago. And since then, I've worked with 20 plus recruitment businesses to help them with their leadership capability.
Cool. And then that's your real area of expertise, isn't it? It's the leadership.
Yeah.
What's your thing? You call it accidental managers.
Yeah, I think this happens in a lot of industries, but especially within the recruitment industry. Typically, if you're somewhat decent at recruitment, you're earmarked for a management leadership position. And sometimes conversations aren't even really had. It's just, it just accidentally happens. You just fall into it. All of a sudden, you're sitting next to somebody that's asking you for help. I was on a podcast recently, and that happened to someone that I was on the podcast with. It was literally a case of, right, you're now managing somebody, they're turning up on the day, they're sat next to you, and it's happening. So there's no sort of pre-conversation, there's no development, there's no, this is what it looks like. It just happens accidentally. So that word has resonated with a lot of people that I've coached that sort of feel like it's just happened.
Yeah.
But I'm sort of doing it blind.
Yeah. So if you were to, well, like, what should happen then? Obviously that's what is happening a lot of the time. What would be a better version? Like what should that process look like, rather than, hey, Amy, we think you're great, so we've got a new starter coming in tomorrow. They're reporting into you, or you're going to help them. What would
good look like?
Yeah, what would good look like?
I think firstly, knowing what to look out for, knowing what leadership potential looks like. That would be number one. I think if you're a business owner, hopefully you've got an idea of what that is. But I think, I've been quite surprised over the last 18 months. A lot of people can't articulate that. And if you can't articulate it, you can't identify it, right? So knowing what good potential looks like. I think secondly, making sure that the people that you do earmark for leadership have expressed a desire of some sort to go into the world of leadership and management. And that might be a verbal desire, I want to do this, in a career conversation, or it might be more of a action desire. They've naturally gravitating towards leadership and management activities. I remember when I was a recruiter, and it was just something that I naturally did. I wanted to give feedback. I wanted people to come to me and ask me for advice. So I think it's absolutely knowing what to look out for. It's making sure that there's a desire there, because it's hard, right? You have to want to do it for the right reasons if you're going to survive it might sound extreme, but if you're going to survive in a leadership capacity. And I coach a lot of people that are making the transition, and a lot of the time when I ask the question, why leadership, I was told that this was what I should do. And this just feels like the only option for me within the business. or I don't really know. It's just I've been asked to turn up to this coaching. And so thankfully that doesn't always happen, but sometimes it does. And I can see and feel this just, I don't know if I want to do this actually. So desire is important. And then it's, I mean, I could go on and on and on here, but then it's clarity of expectation. What does being a managing consultant, a team leader, a manager, a director within this business mean based on our infrastructure, based on our growth plans? What are you doing on a day-to-day basis that would be different from the role that you're doing now? And are you up for that? And what support do you need to do that? So like a job description, right? A job description. And then it's development, right? And then it's, you know, we've seen that you've got potential. You've told us you want to do this. We've told you what you can expect, the good, the bad, the ugly. You're up for it. Now let's look at how we develop your capability in that.
Okay, I'd be really keen to explore that kind of journey, if you don't mind. I just want to go back to something you said a minute ago, which was you're doing this for the right reasons, as you called it. And like, who are we to tell people what's the right and wrong sort of reasons to do something? But I think within that, there's, and you kind of alluded to it, sometimes it can feel like, well, this is the only way that I can progress as a recruiter. It's either be a recruiter forever, or the other option is be a manager, leader, and go down that path.
Yeah.
I had someone say it to me very recently, well, this was the only way I could earn more money.
Right.
Now, I don't believe that's entirely true.
It's usually the opposite.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly in the early stages, right?
Yeah.
So what are the right reasons? You alluded to you wanting, like, having this, I don't know, innate desire to help people.
Yeah. And maybe that's rose tinted glasses. I don't know.
Who knows?
Okay. So what I mean by that is you have extrinsic drivers and intrinsic drivers. I'm sure that's not news to you, Jamie. Extrinsic being money, right? I want to make more money. If I do this, I'll make more money. Or I will have more prestige and credibility, and it will look better. My title looks fancy on my LinkedIn. So that would be an example of an extrinsic motivator to want to go into leadership. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I believe, in my experience, that sort of motivator and driver is short-lived. It's volatile, it's fickle. You know, it's like when you get a group of consultants, what you want to get them on the phone more, what do? You promise pizza for lunch if they do 2 hours. You're probably going to get some immediate behavior change, but are you going to get sustainable behavior change? Probably not, because it's an extrinsic motivator. Intrinsic motivators for me are things like I genuinely get a kick out of seeing somebody progress under my leadership, under my advice, under my guidance. Or I love having conversations at an organizational board level that really drive the business to the next stage. Those are the sorts of right reasons that I believe mean that you'll be more resilient as a leader, and you're likely to not fall at the first hurdle and find another thing that makes you more money or gives you that prestige.
Yeah.
The other thing as well, and I think this is a certain type of person, and I don't think that this is, do I think this is common? It can be common. Some people get into leadership because it looks easy. My leader sat behind a spreadsheet, for example. My leader didn't, but my leader sat behind a spreadsheet was things that I've heard. That looks really easy. That's an easy way to earn 60, 70 grand a year, right? Or I like exerting power over people, right? I mean, there's proper narcissistic tendency there, but I like exerting power over people. I like having authority. There are definitely people that I've coached where I think power and authority and control is really important to you. Now, there's, leadership is a philosophy at the end of the day, and I will take any differing opinions here, but I don't believe that you can truly lead in that way. I don't believe that you will be a leader that people want to follow if that's your agenda.
Yeah. Okay. So if as a business leader, you identify business owner, if you identify people that have that intrinsic motivation to help others, to all of those things that you described there.
Yeah.
What should be, or what's like best practice for next steps then? So I've identified 2 or 3 people in the business that have this innate desire to support other people and they want them to do well, and that's what they get a kick from. What would be, if we were starting from scratch, what would your next steps be? Right, okay, you've identified them, now you do this thing.
So I would think I would get really clear about, okay, well, take a step back actually. The desire is one thing, the potential is another. Are those people that have expressed a desire people that understand and appreciate and live the mantra of personal power over position power?
Oh,
Are they people that they influence using who they are and their ability to build trust over authority? They build trust through their credibility, their results, and their character, their integrity. Are they those types of people? Or are they someone that has to go, you've got to listen to me now because I'm a lead consultant and my job title says that you need to listen to me. So they've expressed a desire. Are they that type of person? I think that's really important.
Are we talking like personality traits here now?
Personality traits, skill. I think that's a really interesting question and point. I think you can develop the ability to do that, but I think it's such a big part of leadership. You'd want some of it before you go, yeah, okay, we're going to invest in this person. So I talk a lot about trust, and this, the component of the components of trust for me are credibility. Are you someone that people rate because your results show that you know what you're doing? And are you someone that people trust because your integrity is in the right place? You can develop someone's credibility, right? You can help them to get better results so that they are perceived as credible. But integrity, can you develop that? I don't know. I think your values need to be pretty there or thereabouts. So in a way, yes. And I think it would be great for us to get onto that at some point, like personality traits. Because I do think that some people find it easier than others. Yeah. So yeah, is that someone that leads with personal power over position power? Is this person self-aware and coachable? I'm sure you've got lots to say about this as well, but
Yep.
Is this someone that is regularly considering how they can improve, and are they secure enough in themselves to be open to identifying weaknesses and having somebody identify weaknesses in them? You've got to be a really secure person if you want a group of people to follow you and lead you. And the smartest people in the room can suss when you're not, right?
Yep.
So self-awareness and coachability. So it's do they have the desire? Yes. But have we gone, do we want this person do we want to invest in this person? Then what I would do, this comes back to the expectations piece. So I think typically within a leader's role, there are 4 components. You've got their business, because I personally believe that all layers of leadership within an organization should have some sort of billing responsibility, client generation, and attraction responsibility. So you've got your business. That's an area that never really drops. It might change, and what's expected of you might change, but it's there. Your business, your team. So what I mean by that is really how engaged are they, and how supported are they from a skill development perspective? There's going to be some key activities within the team part that you'll have to do and that you'll have to carry out, and that will be very different from what you're used to doing before as a 100% biller. Then it's your growth. So what I mean by your growth is the growth of your team. So even at lead consultant, team leader level, you should be playing a part in attracting incredible talent for the recruitment business that you work for, and assessing whether that talent is right for your team. So there will be specific things that you'll be doing that you wouldn't ordinarily have done when you were billing. And then the last is development. And I believe that this should play a part in your career from day one, but it's something that becomes even more important when you make that transition from biller to leader, because there's just so many things that you won't have done before if you've never done management that you'll need to learn. So whenever and I know we'll probably talk about this in a bit, but whenever I talk to billers and billing leaders about where their focus should be, they should always be encompassing a part of, how am I developing this week? How am I developing this month? What skills do I want to possess at the end of this year that I didn't at the beginning? And having that in sort of at the front of mind all the time. So those 4 things, I think, become expectations. And there will be specific tasks and activities within those 4 things that will be the reality shift, right? So for example, team development, you're going to be spending more time on desk coaching others. You're probably going to be asked to run workshops, masterclasses where you weren't before. From an engagement and well-being perspective, you're going to have your finger on the pulse in terms of the well-being of the people around you. What conversations are you making sure that you're plugging in on a weekly basis to find out how your people are and to develop the trust with them? So yeah, I hope I've answered that question. But
yeah, thoroughly, very thoroughly.
Okay.
I think if we're looking at so as a business owner, I've got to identify or is it an educated guess maybe at some of this stuff? Obviously, hopefully it's a bit more than that. And I'm having conversations with people, like you said, but it's do I believe that this person has these skills, these abilities, or certainly I feel that they're coachable enough to be able to get some of these, develop these skills. Bit of a curveball question. What do I do if I'm running a business, I'm identifying my future leaders, and I've got someone that goes, I want to do that, and actually they're not some of that stuff. So they're what the things you said, they're not coachable, they're not self-aware, I sense that this is an extrinsic motivation rather than intrinsic. Do you give those people a shot? Do you have a difficult conversation? What are your thoughts there?
That's a great question.
But actually, if they're saying to you, do you know what, this is the route I want because I want to be a director, because I know that as a director, my base could be 150 grand. As a recruiter, it can only ever be X, and I can be non-billing there. And that's what I really want.
Yeah. If it was my business, I wouldn't want to put that person in that role unless they express somewhat of a desire for the other things too. Okay. Right? It's not binary. It doesn't have to be this or this. It can be both. But if they were, I have no interest in developing others, I don't really care about how my team are feeling and their well-being and how engaged they are, I'm just doing this for my bank account, I'd be inclined to have the difficult conversation, actually. If you're on the fence, so if you're not sure, and that's usually the case, isn't it? You've got somebody that's sort of ambivalent between the two. There's nothing wrong with trying it out, right? There's nothing wrong with, perhaps, if you're a business owner and you don't feel like you've got your finger on the pulse on this stuff, trial them with a coach, trial them with a leadership coach, do a little free, sort of 3-month, 5 sessions type scenario where, and get the coach's opinion as well, obviously in a considered way. But try it, give them a week with a newbie. What feedback did the newbie give? How did the leader feel about what that was actually like in reality? Because God, no, I'm sure that people are different to me, right? We're in a very financially driven industry, but it's got to be a lot of money to do something that you don't like doing and that you hate doing, because people are hard. Influencing people, managing people, it's really hard. So I do think you've got to have somewhat of an interest in doing that, and that I don't think it can be just money. So I think, in answer to your question, I'd have the difficult conversation if I thought this person doesn't have the EQ or doesn't want the EQ to do this role. But if you were on the fence, just experiment with a few things. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay. All right. So we've got these people, and then we're transitioning from typically a high performing recruiter. It's very rare, I think. It does happen that you'll get someone that isn't a top biller, high performer, that then goes into, and that's normally where the accidental bit comes in, right? Is that you go, you're really good. Can you show these 2 new guys or girls exactly what you do? So if we've got someone that's going from biller to billing manager, team leader, what In that transition, what are the biggest challenges you see for that person individually?
There's one thing being able to do the thing, and then there's another thing being able to explain how you do the thing,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of billers are unconsciously competent. They just do what they do and it works, but they don't really know the ingredients. It's like making an amazing cake and not really knowing how you got there. So one of the biggest challenges I think is being able to dissect your process, what you do, how you do it, why it works, and bottle that up to be able to share it with others. I think it's a massive skill. Actually, Stephen Bartlett, like him or loathe him, Stephen Bartlett talks a lot about that, like your ability to share knowledge and yeah, bottle up what you do and share it with others is massive. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges. I think obviously, you know, time management is huge. You go from only looking after yourself and getting away with probably some quite bad habits to having to consider potentially lots of other people, and those bad habits can't be habits anymore because you don't have the time or the capacity and you're learning new things. So time is definitely a thing. I think that if I were to pinpoint like what the one thing that I work with transitioning leaders on the most, it's somewhere between time management and their ability to manage and regulate emotion. And what I mean by emotion is not necessarily emotion as in, you know, a sadness. I mean frustration, I mean anxiety and worry, and just helping them navigate new scenarios that are quite anxiety inducing or frustrating, so that they can lead in a way that's calm and in control and just maintain the credibility that they've worked so hard to build. Because we've all had it, right, where we've come out of a monthly with someone and gone, oh, like just
Yeah.
I want to bang their head against a brick wall, or I've got perhaps a performance management conversation coming up and I don't like being the bad guy and I'm really anxious about having that conversation with that person. How can I control that anxiety so that I can have that conversation in a way that's not necessarily perfect, but in a way where I feel in control and calm, and I'm doing that person, you know, I'm not doing that person a disservice because I'm all over the place.
Okay, so if there's a like, and there will be multiple billing managers, team leaders, team managers listening to this, going, God, yeah, that's me. Like, I get really pissed off and really frustrated, and sometimes that comes out in a, oh, you're so stupid. Why don't you not just listen to me? And other times it comes off to me like crying in the toilet or whatever, anything in between. What's like some little golden nuggets you can give people now in like under 2 minutes of try this?
Okay.
Is there a?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we are stressed, cortisol floods our brain and it acts as a bit of a smoke alarm. And when I say stressed, I mean frustrated, anxious, whatever. It floods our brain. It acts as a bit of a smoke alarm. Our amygdala goes red alert and we start to lose sense of our rational functions in our brain. And that's where we start saying things like that. That's where we start acting really childlike and parental and going, oh God, why can't they just? I want to shake them. So in the quickest way to get cortisol to reduce and to get your rational functions active again is breathing. So before you go into something that you think might frustrate you, or you've left something that has frustrated you and you need to go into something else and be on it, breathe. And it sounds simple. Often the simple things are the best things. Really practice your breathing, because the better you are at that, you know, oxygen and getting fresh air is a game changer. The more you're likely to go, oh, okay, that was silly version of me. Now I'm back. So that's one thing. The second thing, and this is something that I would recommend doing with a coach, it's not easy to do by yourself, not at least at first, is to acknowledge that this might sound really tone deaf, but acknowledge that you can choose how you feel. Your feelings are as a result of your thoughts. Your feelings are as a result of interpretations that you've made about that situation. Okay. So for example, That person is frustrated. I feel frustrated because of this person. Well, what are you thinking about that person that's led you to that frustration? They just don't care enough. They're just stupid. Why would they not want to do it the way I do it? So those are all assumptions and interpretations. Well, what else could be true? Well, they could be feeling really anxious because they just want to do a good job for me. They might have some stuff going on at home that's affecting their ability to perform this month. I might not be explaining it in the best way to them, and that's why I'm thinking they're stupid, but actually it might be me. So there's so many other possibilities outside of your interpretation of a situation. And sometimes what that doesn't necessarily do is completely remove that frustration or anxiety, but it neutralizes it. So you can go, okay, there's potentially other perspectives here that I haven't thought of.
Yeah, I love that question. I think actually, like, it's a great question for when you're leading people and you have that frustration. I think it's a great question to ask if you're a recruiter dealing with a candidate where you're like, he's just a dick. It's like, well, yeah, but what else could also be true?
Exactly.
Is that has he just had a really tough day at work?
Yeah.
And so I think that can play out in quite a few areas. All right, that's really interesting. What are the other challenges you see? So there's the time management piece, there's the regulating your emotions piece. What else? What are the other things that commonly crop up from moving from biller to leader of people?
I think your communication has to be more on point than it's ever been. And if you're a great biller, hopefully you've developed a knack for challenging clients, consulting with clients, saying what people don't always want to hear. But when you are in a leadership role, that becomes even more important, and you're doing it with the people that you're sitting next to 5 days a week. So your ability to communicate. And what I mean by that is your ability to, I really like this concept of high challenge and high care. Often people think that it's a seesaw, and if you're high challenge, your care goes down, and if you're high care, high care goes up, your challenge goes down. That doesn't have to be the case. You can do both at the same time. So communicating in a high challenge and high care way. And that often plays out when you need to do things like have difficult conversations. Do you know what? Let's not even call them difficult conversations. Let's just call them performance conversations.
Yeah.
We should be having performance conversations all the time. That shouldn't happen when shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
It should happen to avoid shit hitting the fan. So having those types of, look, we need to have a conversation about what's not working, and figure out how to make it work. That is a skill. And it's not a skill that I think a lot of people come into leadership with. Unless, as I said, they're incredible at how they manage their clients and they've got a lot of practice in at doing that. But I just think it's a different kettle of fish when you've got a group of people that you want to maintain trust and like a bit. You want to be liked by them, right? And that's typically what goes on in our brains. I want them to like me, but I also need to be the bad guy here. So how can I do both? And that leads me on to another point, which is that transition that you need to make of being liked versus being respected. So I think that's a challenge, actually. People go into these roles wanting to be liked, but that needs to change. It needs to be, I want to be respected. And sometimes that means not being liked every now and then. But it's interesting, isn't it? Like a lot of people that I've coached that have wanted to get better at this and that have feared these types of conversations, they've often then felt the fear and done it anyway with tools and support. And there are things that you can, just really specific but small changes that you can make to your communication that will help people feel at ease. And they've come out of them going, but the person that I feared having that conversation with I was wondering when you were going to bring this up.
Yeah.
Or the business owner has had to let go of 3 people and they're worried about the team's reaction. The team have gone, thank God for that. When about time.
Yeah.
So often, outside the other end of that conversation, it's not really worst case scenario. It's often something even better.
Okay. Can I go back to the other thing, the other topic that you mentioned? So
Yeah.
the communication piece and the emotional regulation. The piece that I hear the most is the time management bit, like this balancing act
Yeah.
of, I'm a recruiter, And by its very nature, I can be somewhat selfish and focus on me and make sure I'm producing revenue, all the rest of it. Chuck a couple of people in the mix, and I have to look after them because I want to.
Yeah.
But how do you
Because I want to. Because it's a desire of mine.
Yeah. Because of this intrinsic motivation I have, I've now got these two people with me. Like, the big thing that comes up is like the balance, isn't it? Of and when it goes wrong, it really goes wrong, and someone's billings slip. Either they don't perform or my billings drop, and then financially I'm worse off. Worst case, like both, they never get off the ground. My billings drop. It's like, what's the secret to success there?
Well, it goes without saying that your ability to manage your time is really important, right? And I think there are lots of things that encompass time management. Firstly, where is your focus for that week, month, quarter, year? And that comes back to those 4 things that I talked about: your business, your team, your development, and your growth. Your focus should be on those 4 things at all times. I do appreciate lives sometimes, and you might need to drop down on one of those and heighten another. But if that thing is, let's say, for example, you need to drop down on team that week because your desk is in turmoil and you need to solve it and figure it out, who's picking up team? Most businesses, they have a decent leadership infrastructure or support system. So who's picking up what you're going to drop when it comes to team that week? So I think when you're a recruiter, you can get away with being a busy fool sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you just do a lot of stuff somewhat to a good level, you could make some shit happen.
Yeah.
But when you become a leader, that doesn't fly anymore. Like, you have to be so intentional about what you're doing that week. So I think number one, like a tip that I would give anyone in any industry would be, it's either a Sunday night or a Monday morning, whenever you plan your week. Imagine that you are at the pub with the team on a Friday, or you're at the gym on a Friday, or you're sitting at home with a glass of wine on a Friday, and you're going, that was a wicked week. What has happened? And you ask yourself that question and you work backwards from there. That answer should inform what you then do that week. And the answer should encompass a bit about business, a bit about team, a bit about your development, and a bit about how you're growing the team that you're in, or the business that you are a part of. So spending a really decent chunk of time thinking about that is really important. I can't remember what this exact quote was, and I'm going to butcher it because I butcher most quotes. But they do say, like, a lot of people, they spend 20% of time planning and 80% of time executing. Whereas if you just shifted that slightly and you spend a little bit more time planning and a little less time executing, you probably execute the right things better.
Yeah.
So I think that becomes really important. That's the first thing. Then I think managing distractions, you have to be pretty militant. You have to have boundaries like never before. And when I talk about distractions, I mean the distractions that you'll get from your team, right? Now, they are either legitimately lost and need your help. That's important. We need to help people that need to be helped, especially if we want them to perform. But a lot of the time we get distractions because people want validation.
Yep.
I work with a lot of leaders who will say, oh, my team are calling me all the time, and we've had our morning catch up and they're set up for the day, and I've given them direction, and we've got another one at midday or another one at the end of the day, but they're still calling me. And my questioning around that is, what are they typically asking you? And it's things that they already know. And what they're looking for is validation and reassurance because they're nervous and they're anxious. So spotting when someone's doing that, I think, is important, and either not entertaining it as much as you would, because they're big boys and girls, they can do it. You don't have to play mum and dad. And if it is something that you think, okay, that I can see that they need help, coach them through it, which might take a little bit of time, but coach them through it rather than be that sole provider of advice and support. Because what you do there is you are validating their need to be validated, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I've come to you for advice and you've given me advice. Therefore, if I come to you again, I'll get advice again and it will all be okay. Whereas, and that people take the path of least resistance, right? So that's normal. Whereas if you coach them and you get them to see that they have the answer, yes, it might take a bit of time up front, but this is where you need to be really conscious of long-term gain over short-term gain. Get them to see that they have the answer. All of a sudden, that belief they've got in their mind of my leader has the answer turns to I have the answer. They're less likely to pick up the phone and call you. So I'm saying a lot here, but what I really mean is being really mindful of the distractions that you're getting, validating the type of distraction and acting accordingly. The second most common distraction that I see is actually from above. So a lot of leaders that I speak to tell me that they are in meetings all day, every day.
I'd be really keen to explore this actually in
Yeah.
more detail, this managing up piece. I think this is
Yeah.
really interesting.
I have conversations with leaders about this all the time. I feel like I can't get anything done because I'm in meetings talking about strategy.
Yeah.
Um,
Could we hold that and just
Yeah.
finish the time management bit? Because I
Yeah.
think and do that like a deep dive on that because I'm
Yeah. So my point on that, from a time management perspective, my point on that is boundaries. So
Okay.
so at the beginning of that week when you're planning your time, there was someone that I was working with recently that had this. At the beginning of the week, they called their line manager, the person that is often pulling them into things, and they went, "This is my plan for the week. This is my focus. These are the things that I'm going to be doing to achieve that. Is there anything that you need me to do or might need me to do this week that would deter me away from that? And if so, can we talk about it now? Can we organize? Like, can we schedule it?" So if you've got somebody that, you know, if your distractions are above, that could be a nice way to manage those distractions. So yeah, I think there's so much that encompasses time management here. But if I had to pick two things, it would be making sure that your focus is on those 4 areas and is really thought out, and that you're managing distractions and setting boundaries that, you know, you're not being pulled away from those 4 things. And the things that you said were really important. Some of that, just add one final bit on that. Some of that you will enable. So we distract ourselves at times. There are things that we need to do, i.e. a difficult conversation, or we need to get on the phone and win some new business this week.
Yeah.
We will often let things distract us from those things. So how much of it is actually a you problem? There's other things like, you know, planning and prioritization, things like the Eisenhower matrix, important versus urgent. Those are things that I recommend checking out. And I think really one last thing, if I could add the cherry on top, it would be give yourself more time to do the thing than you think you need. So I typically suggest timesing everything by 1.5 when you're a leader. So if you need to do a resourcing session and you think it's going to take you an hour and a half, give yourself 2. My maths was never great.
You teed yourself up.
Yeah, I did. Give yourself more time than you need.
I love that, because what's the worst that can happen? You end up with a free half an hour and you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Yeah. So give yourself more time than you need. That way, if you're super optimistic like me, you're bringing yourself back down to earth, but also you're making room for any of those distractions that you might need to jump into that are business critical and deal critical. So yeah, that's
Wonderful.
what I would say.
Okay, cool. I really liked some of the stuff you said there about like being intentional with your time.
Yeah. It's the opposite of accidental, intentional, right?
Absolutely.
And that's really what I'm trying to drive.
Yeah, I really like that. And I like the managing your focus. I think it's hard to manage time, isn't it? Because it's kind of just happening anyway, but you can certainly manage where your focus is. I really like that. So let's do this managing up piece, because I think this is a huge challenge for a lot of people. Let's just move forward a little bit and use the example of maybe someone that's more accomplished as a team leader, team manager, rather than someone in the early stages of this. What are some of the tips? And you kind of alluded to one of them there that I really liked. How do I manage upwards? How do I manage upwards effectively?
Okay, so What a question. So I think it's important to define firstly what managing up means, what it is and what it isn't. So managing up for me is how great or not so great is your professional relationship with your manager? And I put the word professional in capital letters and in bold and underline it because relationship and professional relationship are different. Do I get on with my manager? Do we go to Sushi Samba on a Friday and have a great time? Yeah. Do we enjoy chatting about our favorite football team over a pint? Yeah. No, that's not what I mean. I mean, do you understand the way that your manager likes to be communicated with, and do they understand that about you? I mean, are you 100% certain of what your manager expects of you on a day-to-day and what good looks like? I mean, are you aware of, if for whatever reason your manager decided to take you out of that leadership position, what that reason might be? I'm talking, you can't get a piece of paper in between you and your manager. And there's a game, there used to be a game show. I'm sure there was a game show where, like Mr. and Mrs., right? Where you would ask Mr. and Mrs. a question and they would hold up an answer.
Yeah,
They would have to be
yeah.
the same.
Yeah.
And I always think like that's a really great analogy for managing up. Like if you and your manager did that game show and you were asked questions like, what is expected of so-and-so this week, this month, this year? What would good look like? And they both said the same thing. That would be a good sign of managing up. If your manager had option A of being communicated with or option B, which one would they choose? I know the answer. So it's being super touch tight with your manager on how you work together professionally. A lot of the time, the skills that you need to manage others can be directly applied to managing upwards. So really what we're talking about here are setting expectations. And from a managing up perspective, that's probably more like understanding what's expected of you, making sure that you're really clear about that, asking questions to define that even further if you're not. It's giving feedback to your team, giving feedback to your manager. These are all very similar activities, but they just sometimes feel a bit different when it's your manager. Because
I think that's an interesting one, the feedback thing, right? So how are you able to share that? Just really, like, again, for someone listening to this going, how the hell do I give feedback to him or her? What are some?
I'm like,
is there like a structure or a model or a system that you have for this is how you give feedback to your boss?
Yeah. So depending on the sensitivity of the feedback. So when I say sensitivity, I mean, is it the first time you've given feedback? That might make it quite sensitive. Is it something about their behavior? That might make it quite sensitive. You might want to put more thought into how you do this. So let's say
give you a real example?
That. Yeah.
Or an anecdotal example.
Yeah.
That I'm a team leader.
Yeah.
And I've got my team, I've got my 3 people, and I set them up every morning at 8:30. We're in the office. And they brief me on what they're planning to do for the morning. And then 20 minutes later, boss comes over and she goes, right, what are you up to today? What are you up to today? What are you up to today? And I feel like she's just repeating.
And undermining me. And then, and sometimes she's telling them different things to what I'm telling them, but we've already done this task. It's actually a distraction. How would I give her that feedback? Okay. So the first bit of advice is give the feedback as close as possible to the event. So I would instantly, of course you need to be mindful of what's going on around you, but I would somewhat close to when it happened say, hey, can we have a conversation? Is now a good time to have a conversation. There's this concept of like getting a micro yes before you give feedback. Let someone know that feedback's coming. So sometimes a little question like that of like, hey, can we have a conversation about what just happened there, can sometimes help people to get into the frame of mind of feedback and sort of just let their guard down a little bit. So that can help. I think really and truly, as long as you are giving an example, a very factual, non-emotive, when this happened, when you came over to my desk and said X, that's the example. This is the impact of it. The impact of that is I felt undermined, and the impact of it could also be that they felt that it was a repeat of what I've said to them. Want to get your thoughts on that. This is my perspective. So to keep it simple, what happened, the fact, the evidence, the example, and the impact of it. Ask a question, get their perspective on it. I don't think it needs to be any more difficult than that.
What happens if someone gets defensive? So, well, it's my company. I need to know what's going on here, right?
Yeah.
Like if we get...
Get another leader.
Get out.
Yeah. God, it says a lot about your environment. No, I think, okay. So I think if you're doing that bit up front and you're going, hey, is now a good time to have a conversation about this? There's another thing that you could throw in. If you've got a particularly defensive leader, what you could do is say, before we have this conversation, I just want you to know, like, my intention. My intention is to work really well together. My intention is that we get this team off the ground. And my intention is that we give these guys the best experience possible. That's my intention. Now I want to talk to you about what happened. So sometimes that can help remove defensiveness if you have a particularly defensive leader. Hopefully, and I know that, guys, maybe rose-tinted glasses, but hopefully we are working for leaders that are somewhat entertaining of feedback. But if you have a leader that's particularly defensive, or it's a particularly emotive or sensitive thing that you want to give feedback on, stating your intention really early on in that conversation. If it starts to get a little bit heated, I think there's two options here. Again, it comes back to intention. Hey, I just want to be clear. This is what this is. This is what this isn't. I just want to be clear. This is me trying to make sure that we have a really great working relationship. What this isn't is me trying to overrule you or challenge your authority or suggest that it's my business. What it is, what it isn't. That can sometimes help. If your leader is really irate and you're thinking, this is not going well, there is nothing wrong with you calling TT and going, well, look, I can see this is not going the way that we both want it to go. Maybe let's just grab a cuppa and come back to this tomorrow or later on today or whatever. Because again, it comes back to my point earlier of heightened cortisol. Yeah. When people are in that heightened emotional reactive state, productivity doesn't typically occur. So taking time out, the 90-second window, I learned that from Chris Hatfield. The 90-second window is apparently all it takes for that to reduce, that cortisol to go to its normal state. But yeah, coming back to it tomorrow is never a bad thing.
I really like that from Chris Hatfield as well. The 90 seconds.
It's brilliant.
And then if it's lasting more than 90 seconds, it's all on you and you're choosing that rather than it being a neurological or brain chemical reaction. Amy, the time has absolutely flown by.
Oh my God, yeah.
I've got a question for you that I ask everyone that comes on this podcast. And that is, what do you think? And we were kind of talking off camera about this before we came in.
Yeah.
What do you think the next 12 months holds for the recruitment industry generally?
So I will naturally look at this from a leadership angle. I think our industry will remain tough. It was tough last year. It's tough this year. I think it will remain. I think it will improve, but I think it will remain tough. But I think it will improve. I think that the continuing challenge of the market and mismatched expectations of what recruitment really is like will result in a lack of sales leadership, really good sales leadership and sales leadership talent. I think there'll be a shortage of good leaders out there. I think, and I've got my iPad with me today because there's some data that I wanted to pull, but apparently 72% of Gen Z prefer advancing their careers as an individual contributor rather than pursuing people management roles because they are stressful and they can see the stress visibly on the faces of leadership and they aren't rewarded highly enough.
Yeah.
And that's an alarming stat, right? And I can see why. I'm not in a leadership position. I'm in an individual contributor role. It's a hard role to do. So I think that businesses that want to scale need to fix the perception of leadership and provide adequate support. And when I say adequate support, I don't just mean coaching and training and development. I mean organizational support and great leadership that fixes the perception of leadership, because it can be an incredibly rewarding and fulfilling career in lots of ways. But right now people are going, sod that, because people aren't supported and they are accidentally falling into the role of a leader.
Thank you so much. We could have talked about this for hours, and even just some of the stuff that you said there, I think we could probably have a whole nother podcast on it. For anyone listening to this that thinks, do you know what, Amy is right up my street, that's someone we need in our business, what's the best way for people to get in touch?
I wax lyrical on LinkedIn all the time, and every time I post something, my mobile number, my email address, my probably my personal address is on there. So you can contact me on the phone, you can contact me via email, or just drop me a LinkedIn message. That's probably the easiest and most common way.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.